Great. Thanks everyone for joining us. As a brief intro, my name is Mike Ryskin. I'm on the Bank of America Healthcare Equity Research Team, specifically covering the life science tools sector. And within that, we've got the honor of covering Thermo Fisher Scientific. So it's a great honor to be joined here by Marc Casper, Chairman, CEO, and President of Thermo Fisher. Marc, thanks so much for being here.
Mike, thank you. And Chris, thank you for the rounding up of the description. It is a pleasure to be here with you and the opportunity to chat about the topics of interest.
Great. As with other sessions, there'll be some Q&A if there are questions submitted, so feel free to submit them to the portal. But just to kick it off, Marc, the topic of conversation here is going to be the golden age of biology and specifically how Thermo Fisher enables that for a lot of the audience members in the room. Maybe just to kick things off, not everyone is familiar with Thermo Fisher, although I think most people are. Can you give us a quick overview of the company,
Sure.
What you do, how you help scientists?
Yeah, so Mike, when I think about Thermo Fisher Scientific, the company is focused on enabling customer success. I actually don't know of a company that isn't, but the reality is over the last 25 years, that is the core of who we are. And we serve the life sciences industry, the biotech and pharmaceutical industry, and ultimately our customers know us as the world leader in serving science. And when you look at the company today, our scale is the largest in our industry. A little over $40 billion in revenue, about 120,000 colleagues. We invest about $1.3 billion in research and development and about $1.5 billion of capital each year, and complement that with acquisitions. We really work from the research labs of helping researchers identify the next breakthrough all the way through development of medicines, designing and executing clinical trials, and ultimately commercially producing them is all part of what our ecosystem is today.
And you've used that phrase, golden age of biology, in the past. Could you walk us through that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so when I think about the privilege I have of serving our customers and serving our colleagues, when you talk to researchers in the academic setting, the hospital setting, the biotech and pharmaceutical environment, I've never seen the level of enthusiasm about scientific understanding where it is today relative to any other period of time. And it's not that every year is better than the previous, because there have been periods where there's been excitement and then that excitement didn't yield the insights that were expected. But the last few years have been incredible in terms of the increased understanding, how artificial intelligence is being applied to increase knowledge, and ultimately how that then is getting translated into medicines that are making an enormous impact on human health. And it creates such amazing excitement in terms of the environment that we're living in.
I want to dive into some more specific topics. I think first, when I think about golden age of biology, I think about
Sure.
the discoveries and the shifts that science and healthcare have taken in recent years. Precision medicine is a topic that comes to mind. There's been a lot of talks over the last 2 days here on precision medicine. So could you give us a couple examples of how Thermo Fisher fits into that paradigm shift?
Yeah. So when I think about precision medicine and the role that we play, I'll talk about it from 3 different lenses. One lens is through our clinical next-gen sequencing and how that's applied. A second, how that is working from a companion diagnostic perspective. And then the third would be really bringing out some novel diagnostics outside of sequencing that are making a huge difference. So when I think about cancer, one of the real challenges is how fast can you come up with the right regimen of action or the right course of treatment for the patient sitting in front of you. And genomic information, incredibly important, but often it can take weeks until you get the information for an oncologist to make a decision. And one of the things that we launched some years ago is a sequencer that in 24 hours you'll get the information you need to make a plan of action for that patient, right? And that is something that has been widely adopted around the world, and in fact, in the Mass General system, it's used for how lung cancer patients are treated, and effectively the tumor is profiled, and the course of regimen is usually set in the next day coming out of that information, the very practical application of the technology. Because of that, therapy guidance is a big part of what that technology is used for, and we've made a number of public announcements, whether it's with Bayer or whether it's with Boehringer Ingelheim or some other companies where they haven't been public announcements, where effectively the medicines you're able to identify the right patients that would be relevant for those medicines. So very practical in terms of getting the right therapy for your patient. And then in a totally different area, but one that is an incredible, important area from a medicine perspective is we have great expertise in the area of preeclampsia. It's an area that we've spent many years researching and understanding and licensing technology. And last year we were able to get an FDA clearance of a preeclampsia assay for risk stratification. And that is just a game changer, right, for an expecting mom to know whether it's safe to go home or whether she has to be hospitalized for the rest of the course of pregnancy is truly profound in terms of the impact. And so another example of really the very practical aspects of how you apply diagnostics in a precise way to have better healthcare outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, these are very real-world examples of how that can impact healthcare, impact discovery at various levels. Sure. One of the common themes that's come up more and more in recent years, you talked about NGS and the role that genomics play. Increasingly, there's been a greater and greater focus on proteomics, sort of taking things to the next level beyond just the genome or the transcriptome, in terms of understanding mechanisms of disease, identifying novel drug targets, designing new drug candidates, and some new diagnostic biomarkers. Thermo's played in proteomics for a number of years, but you've sort of increased your investment in this field in recent years. You highlighted some of these new focal areas at your Analyst Day just last week. How do you think about the proteomics field evolving and the role that's playing in healthcare?
Yeah, so the company's roots actually are in mass spectrometry. Long before we were the company we are today, we were the leading mass spectrometry company, and that's where our roots start from. And I remember roughly 25 years or so ago, when I joined the company, I was talking to our chief technology officer, and proteomics was not a used term. He talked about, protein science, I think is how he described it. And he talked about spending a year sequencing a protein. Right? It was a year-long endeavor. We've been passionate about unlocking the insights from a proteomic perspective, and we have developed over the years one subsequent innovation after another in terms of really providing the ability to identify proteins and do that rapidly, at scale, and cost effectively. And in fact, last year we launched a product called the Astral, and given our heritage in mass spectrometry, we're not one to have a lot of superlatives, but when I was talking about the product at the time, I said it's the most significant thing that we launched in 15 years, right? And I don't say that the year before I said that was the most, but really, it was one of those things where it felt very different. And if I think about in its first year of existence, there were over 40 publications in leading scientific journals based on that technology, and that's never happened in our field before, and it's all about the excitement that's going on in proteomics. And we've been adding to our capabilities. We did a $3 billion acquisition that we closed in July of a company called Olink. That is a really nice complement to our mass spectrometry capabilities, which allows for high throughput work in the field and increasing the understanding. I think it's so incredibly important. It's less about the breakthroughs in the technology, but how the insights from understanding the interactions of proteins in a body, and ultimately how you develop the right medicines that are going to be effective make a huge difference. And we've invested substantially in cryo-electron microscopy, which allows from a structural perspective to understand the interaction between a cell and a potential drug. And these are areas that just are trying to take the cutting edge of research and bring them right into practice so that we can make a huge difference from a human health perspective.
Yeah, I mean, as you touched on a couple of things there, between Olink, between Astral, between Cryo-EM, and the FEI portfolio, you're sort of providing tools at various different angles of helping researchers and clinicians study proteomics. Do you think the field is ready for a turning point? Is it about to inflect? Sort of what's needed to take that to the next step?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time, like incredibly exciting. And if I think back to the genomics era and all of the excitement and the potential that really happened around the earlier days, even though proteomics is quite a known and understood field, I actually think the insights now are really quite different, and therefore I think actually the next few years is going to be huge in terms of the impact.
Yeah, the genomics era is what we usually think about as the comparison about how the Human Genome Project and some of the technologies in the 2000s sort of unlocked that field, and it's 20 years later and it's still a very exciting market. So if you think about proteomics still, the new age of proteomics still being in the early stages, you can look to a decade or two of opportunities there.
I agree.
Let's turn to some of the other businesses. Thermo historically has focused more on providing the tools, the reagents, the supplies by scientists. In the last couple of years, you've pivoted into some of these service organizations. Sure. One is the clinical research service business, PPD. There's some clinical trial services business there. You've got expertise in a number of therapeutic areas with a leading CRO, comprehensive lab services. Now that you've brought PPD and it's been part of the combined company for several years, how has that enabled you to serve your customers better, and what's sort of the feedback you've had from some of your pharma partners?
Yeah, so in interactions over the years with the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, and say what is one of the, where's the money spent in terms of developing a drug, and where is the biggest opportunity for impact over time? It really is in the clinical research area in terms of, the process from the beginning of a clinical trial all the way through an approved medicine. And it has to be done in a safe way that will meet the regulatory requirements. And how do you innovate in that in that context? And we spent several years thinking about whether we wanted to get into those capabilities. We decided we did. We believe that our customers would trust us in terms of becoming a core partner there. We studied the industry. We acquired PPD 3 years ago, which was the second largest of the clinical research organizations, and have invested very heavily in the business to build out its capabilities, really. And it is a spectacular set of capabilities. And what we're focused on is how do you actually get a clinical trial done more effectively and done in a more cost-effective way. And if you can shave a month out of the process, and with a successful medicine, that is an extra month of peak sales for the innovator, and that fuels the next reinvestment for the next hope that's going to come out of their pipeline. It is incredibly important work, and every day that you can take out of the process is a day that drives an enormous return for the sponsors. And on those programs that are unsuccessful, the faster you go, the less costly it is to move on to the next most promising idea. So we're very committed to it. We have seen some really interesting capabilities that we've been able to add. We brought a real-world evidence set of capabilities to complement the work that we've done, and we have a number of registries in multiple sclerosis and in psoriasis and rheumatoid arthritis, and these things are all areas where it's able to help improve our sponsors from a patient safety perspective, and ultimately being able to justify the value of those medicines after the launch. So trying to come up with a set of capabilities that really helps our clients get the right medicines out to market as fast and as cost effectively as possible.
When you think about that market and you think about PPD, there's obviously other CROs out there, both public and private, and pharma. A lot of pharma conducts trials on their own and doesn't necessarily outsource all or parts of it. What does PPD within Thermo enable you to bring that the others can't? Like, what about Thermo makes PPD stronger, and what about PPD makes the rest of Thermo Fisher stronger?
Yeah, I think a few lenses. One lens is because we have such a large role in manufacturing of medicines as well, and such a large role in the physical aspects of clinical trials, where we're the largest company in terms of actually bringing the experimental medicine to the clinical trial site. We're able to link our capabilities in a way that it really drives efficiency, right, that nobody else can do, just given the nature of the portfolio of capabilities that we have. And the other aspect is we typically have very meaningful relationships with our customers in terms of size, whether it's a pre-revenue biotech company in terms of the importance, or whether it's a large biopharmaceutical company, and therefore the clients have an extra sort of lever over us in terms of holding us accountable for great performance. And I actually think in a people-related business like a clinical research organization, actually having the client have the power, if you will, is a great thing in terms of making sure we're performing in a world-class way every day.
You tied your answer to PPD here, so it's a natural transition. You talked about your manufacturing capabilities. So in addition to having the clinical research capabilities, you acquired Patheon, a contract development and manufacturing business, CDMO. There's been some other deals you've done in that space, Brammer Bio, that gave you some specific capabilities. So can you talk about how the CDMO role fits within Thermo, and again helps you advance this broader mission of serving golden age of biology?
Yeah, so when you look at the manufacturing and development of manufacturing medicines, right, you have the emerging biotech companies that typically don't have these capabilities, so they've got a partner. And then you have large pharmaceutical companies, excuse me, that often have them. But the world's changed, right? A combination of the need for supply chain resilience, and actually changes in the tax laws some years ago allowed for manufacturing strategy that was no longer tied to purely tax jurisdiction. So if you fast forward over the last 6 or 7 years, the industry does much more work with partners on manufacturing, right? And when you're thinking about how important a medicine is to a company's success, they want a well-capitalized company that's going to support those activities that are in it for the long haul. And we've been able to build through the acquisition of Patheon and some capabilities we had prior to that, the leading CDMO in terms of size, and quite comprehensive. We do drug substance and small molecule, large molecule, advanced therapies. We do drug product for them as well as clinical trial supply. So it's a very core capability and really well respected by our customer base.
And I think you touched on large molecule. I think in more and more large molecules and advanced modalities, cell and gene therapy, the line between research, discovery, and manufacturing starts to blur.
Sure.
You need to, part of the research process is figuring out how to manufacture the drug.
Right.
So if you treat it as discrete steps, you might be at a disadvantage where you have to reinvent the wheel every time you take it forward. How does having all of that integrated showcased?
Yeah, last week we had our investor day in New York, and Mike was obviously listening closely to some of the things that we said. What we really talked about is the super practical examples of how we're bringing these capabilities to life. We're not a company that makes bold claims, right? It's, we're trying to do good work every day and get better tomorrow than we are today, and just passionate about that. But we probably have well over 100 different client engagements where we've been able to shave time or cost out of the process from the insights we have from our services businesses, both on the clinical research side as well as the manufacturing side. And it can be everything from optimizing handoffs to optimizing when a medicine arrives at a clinical trial site, to not having too much inventory. There's just a number of opportunities that can, data and information really brings value to the client.
on the topic of data and information, there were a number of other sessions at this conference that touched on AI, and I'd be remiss if I didn't discuss it with you. Increasingly a common theme over the last couple of years. It's an area you've invested in, and you've spoken of before. What's the role you see for AI in the broader tool space and in R&D in general?
Yeah, so when I think about artificial intelligence and how we apply it at Thermo Fisher Scientific, right, there's a few different lenses. One lens is productivity, right? It's not exciting, but effectively there are better ways of working that we're able to apply the technology to just be more cost effective. And if we can be more cost effective, it means we can reinvest in things that matter more. And so there's very much a passion about about applying it. To do that, right, it can't be top down. It's got to come from the organization. And with 120,000 colleagues, all about training, making the tools accessible internally. We have a Gene.ai as our system. You can pick which large language model you use, and effectively we can keep the information within our own walls. And there are an incredible number of use cases on productivity, right? So that fuels investment. The area that I'm most excited about now is not about the productivity. It's really what I would call the super customer service experience. Right? If you think about any interaction with a company, right, and especially one where it's highly complicated in terms of an application, there's always the super knowledgeable person in the company, the superstar that can answer any question, almost in their sleep. But unfortunately, that person is not replicatable, right? You have the bell curve, if you will, of technical support, applications expertise. And what we're doing is effectively raising the bar on the experience so that the average experience that we give is far better from the information. And I give a very practical example. I couldn't fix an instrument if my life depended on it. But I went through a scenario where I took a particular instrument, took a common problem, and put the prompt into our system and said, the instrument is doing X. And it wasn't super obvious, right? It wasn't one of these really obvious solutions. And just through the interrogation of our internal manuals, in seconds, I got the two choices about what the problem is. And given that I knew what the particular problem was in this hypothetical, I got the right answer. So the actual service engineer literally goes in and says, it's doing this, and right away knows it's one of two variants and which one's more probable. Incredible in terms of the impact of upskilling the customer experience. And then the final example is, how do you make your products and services better, right? As opposed to, the particular example of improving the experience. The one that we're focused on right now is patient enrollment in clinical trials, right? How do we use all of our information to identify the right sites for the particular clinical trial that we're doing so that we can, be more effective in starting a clinical trial process.
Okay. Very helpful answer. We're running into the end of our session, and there's a bunch more topics I want to ask on, but let me take two concepts and merge them into the closing question. One is, as you've discussed between the CRO business, some of the analytical instruments in terms of Astral and Cryo-EM, the CDMO business, Thermo's gone through an incredible evolution over the last 10, 20 years. If you look at where Thermo was when you took the helm versus where it is today, the business has changed dramatically.
Sure.
I would argue for the better. I think most would argue for the better. Having that history in mind and thinking through the evolution of the business and the evolution of the industry, what excites you the most about the future? What do you see as the future of the industry for the next 5, 10 years and the future for Thermo over the next 5, 10 years?
What an awesome time we live in. Right? Think about the work that each of you are doing in terms of the impact you're having on human health and society. It's incredible. If I think about the lens from our customers, pharmaceutical and biotech, to think about the role that the industry played in responding to the pandemic, right? Basically both in vaccine and therapy. And as soon as that was done, to then have the most significant medicine in terms of adoption, unrelated, right? In terms of the GLP-1s and what that's going on in terms of all of the benefit. The dream is alive in this industry, right? The knowledge is just making enormous impact that's so positive for society, and we play a small role in enabling that, and that makes us super accountable to have a good day at work today, to do a great job for our customers and create a brighter future for society.
Great. And with that, thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks,
Marc,
everyone.
thank you.
Thanks very much.
That's great.